very worrying. The Law Society found out in October 2017 of the proposal within the SAVE scheme for a public defender unit. Apparently, the Attorney General is leading this proposal, and there is a lady, Joanne Hetherington, working in his office who is doing a report and investigating the proposal. It's a concern, obviously, that she's working out of the Attorney General's chambers because it gives an appearance of a lack of independence. The Manx Bar are particularly concerned about the proposals in as much as the state will then be investigating crimes, prosecuting them, and if this comes to fruition, also defending the people accused of crimes. So it seems to be fundamental conflict of interest and in breach of human rights legislation. The announcement in Tynwald on the 15th of January related to civil legal aid, and apparently now the Attorney General and Miss Hetherington has been asked by the Legal Aid Committee to now look into and investigate legal aid coming within the umbrella of the Attorney General's chambers. That is my understanding of it, that there will possibly be some civil lawyers employed by the Attorney General's chambers to deal with clients who are currently in receipt of civil legal aid. However, I do wish to make it clear that the proposals have not been clarified, so we're all really in the dark regarding the exact proposals, and the Law Society isn't able to respond to the civil legal aid position until the proposals are clarified.
What clarifications could come out to alleviate some of these fears you have?
Well, we don't know. We just don't know what the proposals are. At one point, they were talking about possibly having advice centres, although how somebody working out of an advice centre could be a substitute for a person actually having their own advocate funded by civil legal aid, I really don't know. But it would appear now that the proposal has changed, and there may be some civil advocates working out of the Attorney General's chambers. However, again, you're back to the problem with conflict of interest. The Attorney General's chambers make the application to take children into care, and then you would have an advocate also working out of the Attorney General's chambers for the parents or the family carers who are defending the care proceedings. Another issue is with social housing. The Attorney General's chambers could be trying to evict a tenant from social housing, and the advocate representing the tenant would have the same employer. So there's massive issues with conflicts of interest.
Is this issue, this conflict of interest argument, been raised with the minister himself? Do you know if this has come up at all? Because this is obviously going through Tynwald at the moment.
Yes, they haven't had time yet to do any kind of response to the new civil legal aid proposal. However, they did issue a briefing to Tynwald in June before the PDU was mentioned again in June in Tynwald, when it was then said it was approved. In principle, it was, they were going to progress the proposals. So there was a briefing to Tynwald in June by the Law Society, and they also issued a press release. And their position was quite firmly that they didn't feel it was human rights compliant, and also that it was highly unlikely to save any money, and certainly not the £1 million which was put forward by the Attorney General's chambers. In fact, the Law Society, they have been asking for documents and information, which they have been met with a blanket refusal. So the Law Society did some of their own calculations based on known figures, and at its very best, the scheme had the potential to save around £62,000. However, the original proposal for the PDU was that it was going to be run by 10 advocates and a director, and that then changed to 6 advocates, and I think it was a couple of administrators. And being cynical, that could be just to reduce the figures and reduce the wage bill and make it look more feasible. However, even on those figures, that doesn't make any provision whatsoever for the fact that we feel that 6 advocates, myself and my colleagues feel that 6 advocates can't possibly cover the police station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The court duty advocate scheme, which runs 6 days a week, 52 weeks of the year, as well as all summary trials. And it also must be remembered that the Public Defender Unit will not cover cases in the Court of General Jail Delivery. So that is another issue. All it will cover is the less serious crimes proceeding in the summary courts, and presumably also the initial hearings for the courts, which then start off in the summary court and progress to the Court of General Jail Delivery. Well, there is also another issue with that, in that it is highly undesirable in the more serious cases to have them started off by one advocate in the lower court, and then another advocate in private practice would have to take the case over to go to the Court of General Jail Delivery. There would be no consistency of representation.
So obviously you've got quite a few concerns with what could be going quite quickly. What do you want to do? What can people do now to, I presume, reverse the decision? Was that what you'd like to see, or would it be alterations?
Well, the decision hasn't been made to implement this just yet. It still is a proposal, but the proposal seems to be definitely gathering pace. And I think any people who have previously been in receipt of legal aid, or think they may need it in the future, or any agencies dealing with the poor and the vulnerable, I think they will need to lobby their MHKs and make their views perfectly clear that, I don't think people will want to just be given an advocate, a random advocate who's employed by the Attorney General's chambers. I think most people, it's a very personal relationship between advocate and client. I think they'll want to choose their own advocate, and they'll want to be able to choose somebody who has the specialisation to deal with their particular case. Even within the scope of criminal law, there are people who would specialise, say, in financial crimes, or they may specialise in motoring or dealing with sex offences. So clients want to be able to pick the best person for the job and somebody that they have faith in. I don't think they would want to just be given somebody on a list from the Attorney General's chambers who will definitely be overworked, and certainly if there's only going to be 6 people covering all this work. There are currently nearly 30 advocates on the police and court duty advocate schemes. I think when I last looked it was 27. So how 6 advocates are going to be able to cover all the work, I don't know.
Will people in situations where they require legal aid, it could be extremely sensitive, it could be something, less sensitive, are those the kind of people that are going to be in a position to lobby their MHKs? Possibly
not. Hopefully the agencies will be able to do that.
It's a difficult thing to do when you're very politically active or politically minded. Then lobbying an MHK might seem nothing to you, but of course, day to day, most people might not be a consideration they'd have. Is there anything else that can be done that you would like to see, or is that down to the Law Society?
I think obviously the Law Society are going to be making their points, and the briefing to Tynwald document was I thought was very good and very comprehensive. Another point which they made is that the figures put forward by the Attorney General's chambers in support of this proposal don't include any overtime for staff, and I think it's unrealistic that advocates working in the Attorney General's chambers would be prepared to go out in the middle of the night for no overtime payments or anything like that. So that the figures just they're just not realistic at all.
Would you like a conversation with the Minister?
Well, I invited the minister to have a conversation with me. I think it was well before Christmas. That was on the Isle of Man News and Politics Facebook page. He didn't take me up on the offer, and I believe he hasn't spoken with the Law Society, and they've tried to speak to him. So hopefully he shall take up the offer at some point.
We'll certainly get in contact with him for a response to this interview as well, so perhaps that can come off the back of it, if nothing else.
I've spoken to a few of the MHKs, so I'm trying to do my best.